Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Chilly Midnight. I'm Leanh, and I'm so glad you're here with me tonight. Before we begin, I want to gently ask you, how are you feeling today? How is your mood? How is your health? Has today been kind to you? Or has it left you feeling tired, quiet, or a little heavy inside? Whatever kind of day you've had, I hope you can rest here for a while. You don't have to explain anything. You don't have to carry the whole day into the night. Just take a slow breath, settle in, and let this small corner of darkness become a place where you can feel a little calmer. And wherever you are listening from tonight, thank you for spending this time with Chilly Midnight. I truly hope you are healthy, safe, and surrounded by a little peace. And if your body or your heart feels tired tonight, I hope the next few hours bring you comfort, quiet, and a gentle kind of rest. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from, what time it is where you are, and how you're feeling today. I always love seeing how many different people and places gather here after dark. Now, dim the lights. Get comfortable. Maybe turn on a fan for a soft background hum. And let the noise of the outside world slowly fade away. For now, it's just you, the quiet night, and tonight's story waiting in the dark. So take one more slow breath, and let's begin. By the time Graham Pike reached the upper switchbacks of Barlow Pass, the world had narrowed to the width of his headlights. Everything beyond them was weather. Snow blew sideways across the windshield in hard, bright streaks. White against black, then black against white, until distance lost meaning. The wipers slapped and dragged. The heater groaned beneath the dash with a tired metallic cough. Somewhere under his boots, the floor of the plow truck vibrated with the steady anger of the engine. Graham kept both gloved hands on the wheel. The county called this road Route 17, but nobody local called it that. To the people who lived below the timberline, it was the cold shelf. To truckers, it was Dead Man's Cut. To Graham, it was simply the upper route. And he had been clearing it long enough to know every blind bend, every leaning mile marker, every place. The shoulder vanished into a drop so deep your headlights never found the bottom. He knew where the wind liked to shove. He knew where ice formed before the thermometer admitted it. He knew where tourists, hunters, and out-of-state delivery drivers started praying. That knowledge had kept him alive for 21 winters. It had also taught him not to stop unless stopping was the only way to keep moving later. The radio on the dash hissed, spun, and settled into a low bed of static. County, 7 to base, Graham said. His voice sounded flat inside the cab, absorbed by insulation, engine noise, and storm. He waited, watching the blade throw a rolling wall of snow off the right side of the road. The plow's amber roof lights pulsed against the whiteout, briefly lighting the flakes from inside, as if the storm had blood moving through it. No answer came. That was not unusual above the third switchback. The mountain swallowed signals when it wanted quiet. Graham adjusted the squelch, got half a syllable from somewhere far below, then only static again. He did not try a second time. The storm had come in early, harder than the forecast had promised. It had dropped over the Tetons after sunset and pushed east through the high country, full of dry powder and old cold. By midnight, the sheriff's office had closed both ends of the pass. Graham was not clearing it for traffic now. He was keeping the snow from taking the road completely. There was a difference. A road left alone for one storm could be recovered. A road left alone for three might disappear until spring. He eased into the next curve, raising the blades slightly where he knew the pavement had buckled. The truck leaned. Chains bit under the tires. Snow burst from the plow in a heavy fan and vanished into the dark beyond the guardrail. On the passenger seat, his thermos rolled against a folded county map. He had not needed the map in years. But he kept it there because it made supervisors comfortable. Paper made men in warm offices believe the mountains could be understood. The map showed black lines, elevation marks, drainage channels, old fire roads, county boundaries. It did not show what the wind could do. It did not show where headlights became useless. It did not show the places where a man could make one decision and spend the rest of his life driving away from it. Graham's jaw tightened before the thought could finish. He reached for the thermos, changed his mind, and turned the defroster higher. The cab smelled of diesel, damp wool. Coffee burned bitter hours ago, and the faint rubber scent of old heater belts. A cracked photograph used to be clipped to the sun visor above him. He had removed it 2 winters earlier after noticing that he never looked at it, only around it. The visor still had the rusted paper clip. His younger brother's name had not been spoken aloud in Graham's truck for 13 winters. Outside, the snow thickened. The route climbed toward the shelf proper, where the road ran along the mountain's exposed side for nearly 2 miles. In summer, drivers slowed there for the view. In winter, there was no view, only a pale emptiness beyond the plow's lights and a drop hidden under curtains of blowing snow. Graham leaned forward. Something was wrong with the surface. Not dangerously wrong. Not yet. Just different. The blade should have been scraping packed powder from asphalt. He knew that sound well. A dull, constant shudder. Metal dragging over hidden blacktop, broken by sparks whenever the cutting edge kissed stone. But now the sound had changed. It had become hollow beneath the scrape. He lifted his boots slightly off the accelerator. The plow growled forward another 20 feet. There it was again. A knock under the blade. Not rock. Wood. Graham's eyes narrowed. He lowered the truck's speed until the engine dropped into a heavy idle. Snow hammered the windshield. The headlights showed nothing but the road, the shoulder, and the endless white push of his own plow wake. The blade struck again. This time the sound came up through the frame so sharply that Graham felt it in his teeth. He braked. The truck stopped with a long hydraulic sigh. The storm rushed in around the silence that followed, filling every small gap. Snow blew across the hood, over the blade, over the lights. The amber beacon kept turning, turning, throwing brief orange circles into the white. Graham sat still. He looked into the mirror. Behind him, the lane he had cleared was already softening. Wind dragging loose powder back over the tire tracks. Ahead, the road vanished into storm. To his right, beyond the shoulder, the slope dropped away. There should not have been anything under the road. No culvert here. No cattle guard. No buried timber. No old bridge decking. He had cleared this stretch hundreds of times. The county had resurfaced it 6 years ago, after a thaw cracked the outside lane. Graham had been there when they did it, standing with a paper cup of coffee while men in hard hats cursed the cold. He shifted into park. The radio hissed. For a moment, Beneath the static, he thought he heard someone exhale. Graham turned the volume down. "Wind," he muttered. He put on his heavier gloves, pulled his hood up beneath his cap, and opened the door. The storm hit him like a living thing. Cold drove itself into his nose and eyes. Snow needled the exposed skin between his scarf and cheekbones. The wind tried to take the door out of his hand. He forced it shut, then stood beside the truck until his balance adjusted to the push of the weather. The plow lights made the snowbank ahead look close enough to touch, and the world beyond it non-existent. Graham took the flashlight from his coat pocket and stepped toward the blade. His boots sank ankle-deep into the loose drift beside the cleared lane. The metal plow towered in front of him, painted county orange under layers of salt, ice, and impact scars. Snow had packed hard against its lower edge. He kicked at it, then crouched with a grunt and swept his flashlight along the ground. At first, he saw only snow. Then something dark showed under the blade. A line, straight, too straight for stone. He scraped at it with one gloved hand. Snow crust broke away. Ice clung beneath it, thick and cloudy. Graham took the short-handled shovel from the side mount and chopped once, twice, 3 times. The edge of something appeared. Not asphalt, not rock. Brown-gray wood lay under a skin of ice, arranged in overlapping rows. Graham stopped moving. The wind pushed snow over his boots. His breath came hard inside his scarf. He chopped again, wider this time, clearing a patch as large as a dinner plate. More of the surface emerged, weathered cedar shingles, old and split, nailed in staggered courses. One of them had been gouged by the plow blade, leaving a fresh pale wound in the wood beneath its frozen outer skin. Roofing. Graham stared at it until the word became useless. The road did not dip here. It did not pass over a structure. There had never been a cabin on this shelf. Not according to county maps. Not according to old-timers. Not according to any survey he had ever seen. He stood, turned slowly, and aimed the flashlight around him. White road, black drop, snowbank, mountain, no house. He looked down again. The shingles remained. The radio inside the cab crackled loud enough for him to hear through the closed door. Graham's head lifted. For a second, between wind gusts, the static shaped itself into something almost like speech. He told himself not to be stupid. Sound traveled strangely in storms. A radio could catch Skip from another county, another plow, a rancher's handset, even a snowmobile somewhere beyond the ridge. He had heard voices where there were none before. He had heard his own name once in a blizzard and kept driving because the alternative was answering. The memory tried to open. He shut it. Graham climbed back into the cab, bringing Snow with him. His gloves shook when he pulled the door closed, though he blamed the cold. The heater swallowed him in stale warmth. The windshield had already frosted at the edges. He grabbed the radio mic. County 7 to base. Static. This is Pike on Upper Barlow, near marker 42. I've got debris under the cut. Possible old timber. Requesting a note for road crew after the storm. He released the button. Nothing answered. Then, faintly, from the speaker, came 3 soft knocks. Graham looked at the radio. The knocks came again. Not static. Not interference. 3 measured taps, like knuckles on glass. His mouth dried. He reached for the volume knob, but before he could turn it, a child's voice came through the static. Thin and close and terribly calm. "Your blade hit our roof." Graham did not breathe. The storm pushed against the truck. The amber lights turned and turned. He looked through the windshield at the patch of road ahead, at the place where the plow had scraped ice from buried shingles. For one impossible second, beneath the frozen surface, a warm yellow light bloomed. Then a curtain moved under the ice. The curtain moved only once. Graham saw it through the windshield, or thought he did. A small shift of darkness behind the ice, delicate as fabric drawn back by two fingers. Then the yellow glow went out, and the buried shingles became only shingles again, dull and frozen under the plow lights. For nearly half a minute, he did nothing. His hand stayed on the radio mic. His thumb rested against the side button. The child's voice had gone, leaving the speaker full of soft static and the faint ticking of cooling metal beneath the dashboard. Outside, the storm pressed its face against every window. Graham told himself he had heard signal bleed. He told himself the yellow light had been the amber beacon, reflecting off the wet ice at the wrong angle. He told himself curtains did not move beneath a county road. Then he shifted the truck into reverse. The plow groaned as he backed away from the exposed shingles. He did not get out again. He did not take a picture. He did not mark the spot with a flare. Every practical habit in him ordered him to do exactly those things, but his body ignored them. He reversed until the headlights no longer touched the patch in the ice, then angled the truck around it and pushed forward along the left side of the lane. Blade raised just high enough to avoid striking whatever waited below. He kept going. That was what men like Graham Pike did in weather like that. They kept going. By the time he reached the upper gate, the sky had begun to pale behind the storm. Not dawn exactly, only a thinning of black into a bruised blue that made the snow seem older. He turned at the locked forestry barrier, plowed a wide pocket beside it, then made the descent with his shoulders cramped and his eyes aching from staring into whiteness. He did not call in the voice. He did not call in the light. At the county yard, 2 hours later, he wrote one line in the route log with a ballpoint pen that skipped from the cold. Possible buried timber or roof debris near marker 42. Avoided impact. Recheck after storm. He stared at the words for too long. Then he crossed out roof so hard the paper tore. The dispatch clerk, Yori Haskell, looked up from her monitor. She was in her 30s, round-faced, with hair tucked under a knit cap and a voice that stayed gentle even when roads washed out and people yelled through phones. She had been working nights for only 3 winters, which to Graham meant she still believed every emergency had a center and an end. "Everything all right up there?" she asked. Graham closed the logbook. "Same as always. Radio was bad. We lost you after the second switchback. Mountain does that. You sound rough. I was driving through a blizzard." Jory. She accepted that with a small nod, though her eyes stayed on him a second longer than he liked. Behind her, the office smelled of burnt coffee, printer heat, wet boots, and microwave oatmeal. A bulletin board held avalanche warnings, fuel receipts, and a faded photograph from some summer safety picnic Graham had managed to avoid. Jory tapped a pen against the desk. "You want me to flag that debris note for Walt? No need until the pass opens." "You wrote marker 42? Near there." "Near there? Graham pulled off his gloves, finger by finger. His hands were stiff. The knuckles reddened and split from cold. Storm buried half the markers. I'll check it myself when the weather gives. Jory's expression shifted at the word myself, but she did not argue. People in the road department knew where Graham ended and where weather began. They knew he took the mountain runs nobody else wanted. They knew he could drive blind around the cold shelf by memory and come back with a truck scarred but upright. They also knew not to ask why a man with 21 winters in service still volunteered for the worst route every year. As if the road owed him something or he owed something to it. There were stories. Of course. County yards produced stories the way salt sheds produced rust. Most of them involved Graham's brother. Nobody told those stories when Graham was within hearing distance. He left before Jory could ask anything else. His trailer sat 4 miles outside town on a rented strip of land behind a closed bait shop. In summer, the place looked merely neglected. In winter, it looked abandoned except for the tire tracks and the thin gray smoke that came from the stovepipe when Graham remembered to feed the fire. Inside, the rooms were narrow, low-ceilinged, and kept too clean by habit rather than care. A pair of boots stood on a rubber mat by the door. A stack of folded thermal shirts sat on a chair no one used. The kitchen table had one plate, one fork, one chipped mug, and a jar of instant coffee pushed against the wall. No photographs hung anywhere. There were pale rectangles where some had once been. Graham stripped off his outer layers and hung them over the heater. Meltwater dripped onto the linoleum. The sound bothered him more than it should have. Each drop was too regular, too patient, like someone tapping from the other side of a door. He turned on the sink and let the faucet run until steam clouded the small window above it. Outside that window, snow blew past the trailer in restless sheets. The storm had followed him down from the pass, gentler now, but still determined. It erased the bait shop, the fence line, the dead grass, the world beyond the glass. For a moment, the window reflected the kitchen back at him. Table, mug, sink, his own face hollowed by the fluorescent tube overhead. Then the reflection seemed to deepen, not change. Exactly, deepen, as if another warm room waited behind the glass, yellow-lit and crowded just beyond his own. Graham shut off the faucet. The window returned to black. He made coffee and did not drink it. He sat at the table with both hands around the mug and watched water run from his coat onto the floor. In the silence, his brother's name tried to come up. Ellie. Graham pushed it down with the practiced force of a man closing a hatch before floodwater reached the stairs. Eli had been 23 when he died, though in Graham's mind he remained somehow younger than that, long-limbed, narrow-shouldered, always smiling at the wrong time, always believing the world would make room for him if he arrived late and apologized beautifully. He had borrowed money and forgotten tools and charmed old women at gas stations into giving him free coffee. He had called Graham old man before Graham was 35. He had also thought storms were dramatic rather than lethal. That was how Graham remembered it when he allowed himself to remember anything at all. Eli had gone up toward Barlow in a weather system every radio station had warned against. Graham had been working that night, clearing the lower road, listening to county chatter break apart in static, somewhere above the shelf. Eli's truck had slid out or stalled or stopped. The official report said exposure. The official report said limited visibility, delayed response. The official report said no negligence found. Graham had read it once. then never again. What the report did not say, because Graham had not said it either, was that there had been a moment when he saw something through the storm. A red shape near the shoulder, a lifted arm, or a branch, or a reflector twisted loose and swinging in the wind, or nothing. Memory was not a courtroom. He had learned. Memory changed shape depending on who was asking. He had been operating the south plow that night, trying to keep the lower grade from sealing over before the ambulance from Laramie came through for another call. He had been low on fuel. The road had been glazing behind him as fast as he cleared it. The radio had been full of voices, all of them urgent, all of them needing something. And in a storm, stopping could kill more than one person. That was the sentence he had built his life around. Stopping gets people killed. He said it to new drivers when they wanted to help stranded tourists without checking the slope above them. He said it to deputies who parked badly on ice. He said it to himself when headlights appeared in ditches. When shapes moved where shapes should not move. When the radio coughed out half a voice and his hands tightened on the wheel. Stopping gets people killed. Moving keeps the road alive. He stood suddenly, irritated by the coffee smell, by the dripping coat, by the smallness of the trailer. He crossed to the closet beside the bathroom and opened it without knowing why. Inside hung 2 work coats, spare gloves, a box of chainsaw parts, and an old cardboard file box sealed with tape yellowed at the edges. Graham looked at the box. He had not opened it in years. His mother had given it to him after she moved to Arizona, after she stopped asking him to visit, after her grief turned into a dry politeness that made every phone call shorter than the last. She had said the box contained things that should stay with family. Graham had put it in the closet and let dust decide what family meant. Now, for no reason, he would admit, he took it down. The tape peeled with a soft tearing sound. Inside were photographs, folded papers, a cracked plastic snow globe from a roadside diner, Eli's old license in a sleeve, and a red knit cap Graham remembered pretending not to like. He moved those aside with 2 fingers and found a map beneath them. Not a county map, an older one. The paper was soft along the folds and browned at the corners. Someone had marked Barlow Pass in pencil. But the road was different, thinner, wandering higher along the shelf before dropping into a narrow valley that did not appear on modern maps. In that valley, beneath the pale pencil line, someone had written a name. Graham carried the map to the kitchen table and flattened it beneath the mug. The word was faded, but readable. Mercy Ridge. He stared at it, waiting for recognition. None came. He knew every ranch, spur, drainage, and abandoned service track for 30 miles around Barlow. He knew the names people used and the names the county had forgotten. He knew where miners had camped, where surveyors had died, where a school bus once got stuck for 11 hours in 1989. He had never heard of Mercy Ridge. The trailer creaked softly as the wind leaned against it. Then his radio. The handheld unit he had left clipped to his wet coat by the door. Clicked awake by itself. Static filled the room. Graham turned toward it. For several seconds, there was only the storm speaking through distance. Then the same child's voice whispered from the speaker, "We kept the porch light on for you." The voice came from the handheld radio clipped to Graham's coat, small and dry beneath the static. as if the speaker were not on a mountain frequency at all, but pressed against a wall somewhere inside the trailer. Graham did not move. The radio sat by the door, its black casing wet with melted snow. A thin runnel of water had gathered beneath it and was crawling across the linoleum toward his boots. The storm worried at the windows. Somewhere in the heater, a metal panel ticked and ticked as it cooled. He waited for the voice to repeat. It did not. After a while, Graham crossed the kitchen in 3 hard steps and snatched the radio from the coat. He thumbed the transmit button. Identify yourself. Static answered. This is County 7, he said. Louder. Who is on this channel? The static thickened, rising and falling like breath through cloth. Then Jory's voice burst through, broken but recognizable. Graham, you there? Relief should have come. It did not. His grip only tightened around the radio. I'm here. You keyed in? No. Your unit opened for a second. Just noise on our end. A pause. You all right? Graham looked at the old map on his kitchen table. Mercy Ridge sat in pencil beneath his coffee mug. The valley shaped like a thumbprint pressed into the paper. Fine. Storm's not letting up. Walt wants Upper Barlow cut again before afternoon if you've slept. Graham almost laughed. The sound rose in his chest and died there. Roads closed. Emergency access. Sheriff's office wants the shelf kept passable. They've got a state crew staged below if the slide wrist drops. He stared at the radio. The shelf. Marker 42. The buried shingles. Tell Walt I'll take it, he said. You sure? Dale offered. Dale doesn't know that road. Jory was quiet for a moment. No, I guess not. Graham released the button and stood in the kitchen with the radio in his hand until the room felt too still. He turned the unit off, then turned it on again. No child's voice came through. No porch light. No tapping. Only the weather band hiss and the distant clipped exchanges of men pretending the mountain obeyed procedure. He slept for less than an hour in his chair, boots still on, chin dropped to his chest. His dreams, if they were dreams, were narrow and white. A road unrolled beneath him forever. A red-knit cap lay ahead on the shoulder, always just beyond the reach of his headlights. Each time the plow neared it, the cap slid farther into the storm, pulled by an unseen hand. When he woke, the coffee had gone cold and the map was no longer flat. One corner had curled upward. Beneath it, on the kitchen table, meltwater had formed a shape like a small window. Graham wiped it away with his sleeve and left the trailer without breakfast. The county yard was a blur of storm lamps, fuel pumps, diesel vapor, and men hunched against wind. Plow trucks idled in rows like tired animals. Snowbanks towered along the fence. The salt shed doors stood open, its dark interior breathing dust and minerals into the air. Walt Kinney, the road supervisor, met Graham near the fuel island. Walt was wide, gray-bearded, and old enough to have forgotten which stories were warnings and which were jokes. He carried a clipboard under his jacket to keep it dry. You saw something up there? Walt asked. Debris. What kind? Old wood under ice. Might be from a washout. Walt frowned. No, washout there. Then maybe I hit a buried sign. You wrote timber. I wrote possible timber. You also tore the paper. Graham looked at him. Walt held the look for 2 seconds, then gave it up. Men like Walt knew when another man had put a fence around something. It was not kindness that made him step back. It was habit. Take the greater blade higher at 42. Walt said, "Don't rip up anything we can't fix until spring. I know how to run a plow." "That you do." Graham climbed into County 7 and shut the door before Walt could say more. By late morning, the storm had changed character. It was no longer a blind white assault, but something slower and heavier. Snow falling in thick, determined sheets. Visibility stretched just far enough to tempt mistakes. The lower road was passable in the way winter roads were passable, technically open to anyone foolish enough to trust language. Graham drove past the closure gate and began the climb. The world narrowed again. The plow blade cut a clean path through fresh accumulation. Snow rolled away in dense curls, breaking over the edge of the blade and sliding toward the ditches. The truck's chains struck rhythm into the road. Grip, lift, bite, drag. Graham listened to every sound. At the first switchback, the radio coughed with ordinary traffic. At the second, it faded. By the third, the static returned. Graham did not touch the volume. He had decided, during the climb, that he would handle the thing at marker 42 the way he handled every other problem on a mountain road. He would look at it in daylight. He would measure it. He would mark it. He would call it what it was, not what the night had made it seem. Wood under ice was only wood. Light under ice was reflection. Voices were signal bleed. Curtains did not move unless something living moved them. And nothing living waited beneath a frozen county road. That thought carried him almost to the shelf. Then the plow struck the roof again. Not hard this time. Graham had raised the blade before the marker, but the metal edge still caught something beneath the snowpack and dragged across it with a long, splintering one. He braked. Ahead. The shelf stretched pale and empty. The guardrail on the right was half buried. Wind combed loose powder across the cleared lane. The marker stood crooked near the shoulder, its black number rimmed with ice. 42. Graham left the engine running and stepped out. The storm felt quieter in daylight, which made it worse. At night, the mountain could hide behind darkness. Now everything was visible enough to be denied with precision. He walked to the blade. The plow had shaved away more than snow. A section of the packed drift beside the road had broken open where the blade's weight collapsed against it. Under the layered ice, below the road surface and slightly beyond the shoulder, something angular lay exposed, not a loose patch of shingles. A roofline. Graham stood at the edge of the cleared lane and stared down. The structure was tilted under the ice, as though a house had sunk sideways into the mountain and been frozen there mid-collapse. A steep gable emerged beneath layers of blue-white compression. Cedar shingles ran downward into darkness. A chimney, cracked near the top, pressed against the underside of the snowbank. Beneath the eaves, he could see the upper edges of two windows. Windows. He heard his own breathing rasp inside his scarf. The glass was not broken. It sat beneath several inches of ice. Dark at first, then faintly yellow as his shadow fell across it. Graham took one step back. The light grew warmer. Not a reflection, not the beacon, not the headlamps. The angle was wrong. The glow came from inside the buried house, soft and steady, the color of a lamp left on in a room where someone still expected company. He should have returned to the truck. Instead, he crouched, his knees cracked. Snow soaked through the fabric of his work pants. He leaned close enough that his breath fogged the ice above the nearest window. Something moved behind the glass. A small shape withdrew from the curtain. Graham's chest tightened. The curtain was pale with a faded floral pattern, visible through the ice in wavering fragments. It hung inside the buried room, dry and loose, not frozen flat against the window as it should have been. Behind it, a child's face appeared for 1 second. Round cheeks, dark eyes, one hand lifted to the glass. Graham fell backward. His elbow struck the road. Pain flashed up his arm. He scrambled to his feet with the clumsy panic of a man too old for sudden fear and backed toward the truck. The radio in the cab crackled. He heard it through the open door before he reached it. Not dispatch. Not Walt. The child's voice came again, clearer than before, threaded with static but close enough to sound as if the speaker sat in the passenger seat. "Why didn't you stop?" Graham climbed into the cab and slammed the door. The heater roared. The windshield fogged from his breath. The yellow window glowed beyond the plow blade. Dim, but unmistakable. Buried in the snowbank where no house had ever stood. He grabbed the radio mic. "County 7 to base. I need..." The words failed. What did he need? A survey crew? A priest? A rescue team for a house under a mountain road? A deputy willing to believe there was a child behind an iced-over window beneath Barlow Pass? Static swallowed the open channel. Then another sound came through. 3 knocks. Graham looked at the windshield. The child behind the buried window lifted one hand again. This time, the knocking did not come from the radio. It came from beneath the plow blade. 3 measured taps. Then silence. Graham sat with the radio mic in his hand. The transmit button pressed halfway down, his thumb trembling just enough to make the plastic creak. Outside the windshield, snow dragged itself sideways across the road. The buried window glowed dimly under the bank. And beyond the ice, a child's hand rested against the glass. Small fingers spread, as if testing the thickness between one world and another. He released the mic. The radio spat static. The hand disappeared. Graham did what he had done every winter of his adult life when the mountain offered something he did not want to understand. He made it smaller. He lowered his breathing. He named parts. Snowpack, ice lens, timber remains. Reflection, radio skip. Hypoxia from fatigue. Old grief, sharpening ordinary noises into accusation. People heard things when they were tired. That was true. He had known men who swore they saw animals walking upright in whiteouts. Women standing in ditches. Headlights coming toward them on roads that had been closed for days. One driver from Sublette County had quit after hearing his dead mother call him over the CB during a storm. Another had put his plow into a ravine after steering away from what he later called a church bell in the middle of the road. The mountain did not need ghosts. Weather was enough. Graham set the mic back in its hook. "Old mining debris," he said aloud. His own voice sounded too loud inside the cab. There had been mines in the high country once. Prospectors had chased silver, copper, coal. Rumors. Anything with a shine or a promise. They had built sheds, cabins, assay huts. Whole little failures in valleys nobody visited anymore. A slide could carry timber farther than seemed possible. A roof section could travel under snow and ice. Frozen into the pack. Shoved by spring melt, buried again, lifted over years. He had seen stranger things come down a mountain, hay bales, half a piano, an elk skeleton locked inside a block of avalanche ice. A house window with a child behind it was not the same thing. Graham started the truck forward before his mind could finish the sentence. The plow blade groaned over the buried roofline. He kept it lifted, barely shaving the upper crust now, and eased around the broken snowbank with the care of a man avoiding a pothole rather than a miracle. In the side mirror, the yellow window shrank behind him. For a moment, he saw something else in the mirror. A porch, not whole, not clear. Just the angled suggestion of a porch roof emerging from the drift beyond marker 42. Its posts sealed in ice. Its railing furred with frost. A square of warm light sat where a door should have been. Graham looked away. The mirror showed only snow when he checked again. He drove the rest of the shelf without stopping. The route grew narrower where wind had hardened the drifts into ribs across the pavement. He cut them down mechanically, letting habit hold him upright. Blade, throttle, angle, brake, blade, throttle, angle, brake. The truck obeyed. The road appeared beneath the snow, black and wet and familiar. By the time he reached the upper gate, he had almost convinced himself. Almost. At the turnaround, he stopped and filled out a maintenance tag with stiff fingers. Subsurface debris, possible old structure material. No immediate road hazard if blade kept high. He paused over the last sentence, then added, recommends spring inspection. That looked sensible. Sensible words had weight. They made the impossible bend toward paperwork. When he returned to the county yard, Walt Kinney was standing in the open bay with a cigarette he was not supposed to smoke on county property. The wind kept tearing the smoke apart before it reached his face. You look like hell, Walt said. Graham climbed down from the cab. Feel better than I look. Not much of an achievement. Graham handed him the maintenance tag. Walt read it, lips moving slightly under his beard. Old structure material, could be mining. There weren't mines on that side of Barlow. Then logging. No timber cut that high. Then somebody dumped something before your time. Walt looked up. My time goes back a ways. Graham pulled off his gloves and slapped snow from them against his thigh. Everything goes back farther than somebody remembers. For once, Walt did not answer quickly. The older man looked past Graham toward the storm-dark ridge beyond the yard fence. You see lights up there? Graham's stomach tightened. What? Couple hunters called dispatch last week. Said they saw lights along the shelf after midnight. Jory wrote it up as snowmobile activity. Road was closed. Snowmobilers don't read signs. No, Graham said. I didn't see lights. The lie came out clean. Too clean. Walt folded the tag. Get some sleep before you go back up. I'm not going back up today. Good. But he did. By late afternoon, the county called for another pass. Snow had piled fast over the morning cut, and the sheriff wanted Barlow kept open enough for emergency equipment. If the storm shifted east, Dale Rusk had already taken one truck into the lower grade and radioed back that visibility was pure soup. Walt told Graham to stay down. Graham said the upper road had a bad drift pattern Dale would not read correctly. Walt studied him for a long moment, then tossed him the keys to County 7 without comment. The second climb felt different. The storm had softened into dusk. Snow still fell, But the wind had calmed, allowing sound to carry strangely. The engines seemed louder. The chains seemed closer. Each time the plow blade scraped the road, the vibration rose through Graham's feet and into his bones. At the third switchback, the radio began to hiss. At the fourth, it produced a faint tune. Graham turned the volume down, but not off. The melody was almost buried in static. Four notes, repeated slowly. Not a song he knew. Exactly. Though it pressed against some older corner of memory, children humming in a schoolyard, a music box in a diner, Eli whistling to annoy him during a long drive. He struck the dashboard with the heel of his hand. The tune broke apart. Bad signal, he said. When he reached marker 42, the buried house was gone. For one wild moment, relief opened inside him. The snowbank had sealed over. No roofline showed. No window glowed. No child waited behind glass. The shoulder was smooth, white, untouched except for spindrift curling along the guardrail. Graham laughed once, short and humorless. There, he said. There it is. He lowered the blade. The plow bit into the drift. Snow rolled away. A mailbox appeared. Graham hit the brakes so hard the truck slid sideways before the chains caught. The mailbox stood half buried at the edge of the lane, its black metal body crusted in ice. Its red flag raised. It was mounted on a wooden post that vanished straight down into the snowpack where the road shoulder should have been. The box had no rust, no dents, no bullet holes. It looked ordinary, almost new, except that it stood 12 miles above the nearest rural delivery route and beneath 3 feet of mountain snow. On its side, white letters spelled a name. Keller. Graham stared. He had never known anyone named Keller on Barlow Pass. He opened the truck door and stepped down into the storm. The mailbox flag clicked in the wind. He wanted to leave it alone. Every instinct in him said the box was not meant to be touched. But another part of him, older and angrier, refused to be frightened by roadside junk. He pulled the small door open. Inside was a folded newspaper, dry as if it had been delivered that morning. Graham took it out. The paper was yellowed but warm. Actually warm. Heat moved through his glove into his palm. He unfolded it enough to see the masthead, the Mercy Ridge Ledger. The date beneath it was January 23rd. 13 years ago. Graham folded the paper again without reading the headline. Something shifted behind him. Across the road, the snowbank settled with a soft sigh. A shape pushed through the white, 2 porch posts. Then a railing. Then the upper half of a front door painted dark green. Ice skinned the door but did not cover the brass knob, which turned slowly from the inside. Graham backed away. No, he whispered. The knob stopped. From somewhere beneath the snow, a child began to hum the 4-note tune. Graham ran for the truck. He climbed in, slammed the door, and threw County 7 into reverse. The plow backed hard down the road, amber lights swinging wildly across the storm. In the mirror, more shapes emerged behind him as the blade's earlier cut loosened the snowpack. A chimney breathing pale smoke into the wind. A second mailbox. The corner of a porch roof. A window with curtains drawn open. At the window stood an old woman in a blue housecoat. She raised one hand, not waving, counting. 1 finger, then 2. Then 3. The radio clicked. Jory's voice came through, thin, with distance. County 7. Base. Graham. Do you copy? He snatched the mic. Base. This is 7. I've got, He stopped. In the mirror. The old woman lowered her hand. Behind her, through the yellow-lit window, a table came into view. Plates set. Cups waiting. Steam rising from bowls no one had touched. Jory said. Graham. He looked at the newspaper on the passenger seat. He had not remembered bringing it with him. The folded front page had opened by itself. The headline was visible now in heavy black letters. Plow passed before slide buried Mercy Ridge. Below it was a photograph of a younger Graham standing beside County 7. His face turned away from the camera, as if he had already seen the town and chosen not to look. The photograph on the newspaper should not have existed. Graham knew that before he let himself look at it properly. He knew it from the old shape of his own shoulders in the image, from the county coat he had worn 13 winters ago, from the way his younger face turned away with that familiar, stubborn refusal to be caught by anything that wanted an answer. The picture showed County 7 parked near a wall of snow, behind the truck. Almost swallowed by white, stood a row of houses, not clearly, not enough for a court, just roof lines, chimneys, porch posts, the suggestion of a street buried in storm. And there, at the bottom edge of the frame, a red knit cap lay half-covered beside one tire track. Graham folded the paper with such force that it split along an old crease. The radio hissed. Graham, Jory said again. County 7. Do you copy? He raised the mic, but his hand would not close around the button. Ahead of him, the road had changed. It was still Barlow Pass. The guardrail still ran along the right side, its top rail lifting and vanishing under drifts. The mountains still rose dark to the left, crusted in ice and wind-scoured pine. But the distance between marker 42 and the next bend had stretched. Graham knew that stretch. He could have driven it blind, and often had. From the Keller mailbox to the rock overhang before the fifth curve was no more than 600 feet. Now his headlights showed only road continuing forward, pale and empty, swallowed by dusk. No bend, no overhang, no end. The fuel gauge dropped. Graham saw the needle move with his own eyes, sinking from just below 3/4 to half in a slow, deliberate slide. That's not possible, he said. The words fogged the windshield. He tapped the gauge. It trembled but did not rise. County 7 had been filled before he left the yard. He had climbed, cut, reversed, and idled. Yes, but not enough to burn through that much diesel. Not even close. The radio clicked again. This time, the voice that came through was not Jory's. It was older, male, calm in the way men sounded when they had run out of places to put fear. Plow went by already. The voice said, "Didn't stop." Graham's mouth went dry. He shoved the truck into drive. The blade pushed forward. Snow curled aside, heavy and obedient at first. Then the cut deepened. The plow was no longer clearing fresh accumulation from pavement. It was shaving down a hard-packed ridge that rose above the road like the buried spine of something enormous. The engine labored. Graham lifted the blade an inch. The snowbank to his right collapsed. A porch roof surfaced. It came out of the drift in pieces. revealed by the passing blade. First, the black edge of shingles, then a gutter sealed with glassy icicles, then a row of porch lights glowing under frost. Each bulb was yellow and steady. Each bulb lit a different patch of nothing. Behind the porch lights, curtains moved. Graham did not look directly at them. He kept his eyes on the road. That became harder after the next 100 yards, because the road began filling with tire tracks ahead of him. His own tire tracks. They ran forward from beneath the plow's headlights. Two dark, chain-marked paths pressed into the snow before his truck reached them. Every curve of the tread matched County 7. Every broken bite from the left rear chain matched the loose link he had been meaning to report for 2 weeks. He stopped. The tracks continued past the nose of the truck and vanished into blowing snow. Graham looked in the rearview mirror. Behind him, the road he had just cleared was smooth. No tracks. No plow cut. No proof he had come from anywhere. The fuel gauge dropped another eighth. Jory's voice returned, distorted by static. Graham, your signal keeps bouncing. Are you descending or climbing? He pressed the mic button at last. I'm on the shelf. A pause. That's not possible. His throat tightened. Why? You cleared the shelf 30 minutes ago. I'm on it now. Walt has your GPS below the 4th switchback. Graham stared at the road ahead, at the tracks leading away from him into white. That's wrong. I'm looking at it. Then your system's wrong. Jory said nothing for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice had changed, softened by something like caution. Graham, Dale says he can see your taillights above him. Graham looked at the mirror again. Nothing behind him but the empty road. He's mistaken. He says you're stopped near marker 38. The marker beside Graham's window was 42. At least, it had been. He turned his head slowly. The black numbers on the ice-rimmed post beside the truck now read, Sancherba. Graham's skin tightened over his face. He had not moved backward. He had not descended 4 markers. The Keller mailbox had been at 42. The buried roof had been at 42. The newspaper had come from 42. The mountain had moved the numbers around him like pieces on a board. He threw the truck into gear and drove. The road did not end. Houses appeared closer to the surface now. At first, they had been buried deep, sealed beneath ice and seen only in broken suggestions. Now their roofs pressed upward through the snowpack, making low humps beneath the white. Chimneys stood like dark fingers along the shoulder. Mailboxes leaned out of drifts with red flags raised. Porch railings surfaced in segments, wet and shining where the plow exposed them. Curtains stirred behind glass only inches below the crust. Every house had light inside. Not bright light. Not enough to warm the road. Just the dim, stubborn glow of rooms occupied through a storm. Kitchens waiting. Lamps left on. Hallways holding their breath. People watched from within them. Graham saw them in fragments because he refused to see them whole. A woman's hand resting on a curtain. A boy's pale forehead above a window sill. An old man seated beside a stove, face turned toward the road. 2 children standing shoulder to shoulder behind a pane of ice, their mouths moving in silence. They did not pound. They did not scream. They did not chase him. They watched as if watching was what remained after hope had frozen. The 4-note humming rose again through the radio. This time more voices joined it. Children first, then adults, then something lower, not quite a voice. as if the mountain itself had learned the tune by hearing it under snow for 13 years. Graham turned the volume knob down until it clicked off. The humming continued through the vents. He punched the heater controls. The air turned cold, not gradually. Instantly, frost spread from the dashboard seams in thin white veins. The windshield filmed over at the corners. Graham wiped it with his glove and saw, in the brief clearing, a figure standing in the road ahead. He hit the brakes. The truck slid. The figure did not move. It was a man, or had the shape of one, standing with his back to Graham in the center of the lane. He wore a red knit cap and a brown work jacket crusted white along the shoulders. Graham's breath stopped. The plow came to rest 10 feet behind him. "Eli," Graham whispered. The figure turned its head slightly. Not enough to show a face, just enough to listen. Then it began walking away along the road, following the tire tracks that Graham had not yet made. "No," Graham said. He did not know whether he meant no to the road, no to the figure, or no to the part of himself that wanted to follow. The fuel warning light came on. A sharp yellow symbol glowed on the dash. Impossible. The tank could not be empty. The truck could not be lost on a road it had driven since before Graham's beard went gray. His brother could not be standing in front of him 13 winters after exposure had put him in a closed casket. Graham jammed the truck forward. The figure in the red cap kept walking. The plow blade pushed through snow that rose higher than its steel face. The engine strained. County 7 shuddered as if the road beneath it were no longer pavement but rooftops. Porches, fences, buried furniture. Each time the blade carved a new swath, another piece of town surfaced. A church steeple under ice. A schoolhouse bell tower bent sideways. A diner sign with half its letters glowing weakly beneath the frost. Mercy Ridge Calf. The last letter was buried. Graham's mind tried to reject the sign. There had been no town. The modern maps showed no valley. County records showed no settlement. His own memory showed only storm. Static. A red shape near the shoulder. And the hard decision to keep moving. But the town kept rising. And the people kept watching. The figure in the red cap stopped beside a buried intersection where the snow had split open around a street sign. Graham could read the letters through ice. Pike Road. His hands went numb around the wheel. Eli turned fully now. His face was not ruined. That was worse. He looked cold, blue at the lips, lashes crusted white, but recognizably himself. Younger than Graham had any right to remember him. His eyes met Graham's through the windshield with no anger in them, only expectation. The radio clicked on by itself. A chorus of voices filled the cab, soft and patient. "You drove past the first house." Graham shook his head. "You drove past the second. The fuel gauge lay below empty. You drove past the children in the road." Graham pressed both hands over his ears. But the voices were no longer coming only from the radio. They came from the vents, from beneath the floor, from the ice under the plow, from the yellow windows watching on both sides of the road. Eli lifted one hand and pointed not at Graham, but toward the snowbank beside the truck. There, nearly level with the passenger window, a front door had surfaced from the ice. Its dark green paint was scratched and frozen. Its brass knob turned slowly. This time, the door opened. Warm yellow light spilled into the storm. And from inside the buried house, someone said, "Come in." Graham, You've kept us waiting long enough. Come in. Graham, you've kept us waiting long enough. The voice came from inside the house. Not from the radio. Not from the storm. Not from any place Graham could explain away by distance or wires. It crossed the open threshold with the warmth of kitchen air. Soft and ordinary. The kind of voice that might call a man in from shoveling snow before supper went cold. Graham sat behind the wheel of County 7 and did not move. The open door stood nearly level with the passenger window, though no house should have been high enough to reach it. Warm yellow light spilled over the snowbank and turned the storm into falling gold for a few feet. Beyond the doorway, he saw wallpaper with tiny blue flowers, a coat rack crowded with winter jackets, a pair of child's boots placed neatly on a mat. Then the road cracked beneath the plow. It began as a dull pop under the blade, deep and resonant. The truck shuddered. A line opened in the packed ice ahead of him, black at first, then glowing faintly from beneath. It ran from the buried house across the lane and under the left tire, widening with a sound like a frozen lake splitting in spring. Graham grabbed the wheel. County 7 tilted. The engine coughed. The blade dropped with a heavy clang and wedged into something below the road. Snow slid off the hood in sheets. The open house door vanished behind a sudden curtain of powder as the shoulder collapsed inward. For one suspended second, the truck hung between road and hole. Then everything went still. Graham's breath came in short bursts. The cab leaned sharply to the right. The fuel light glowed on the dash. The radio was dead now, its screen blank, though the four-note humming continued from somewhere beneath him. He looked through the windshield. The crack had opened into a gap wide enough for a man to pass through. Under the road was not dirt, not rock, not the tangled darkness of an avalanche hollow. There was a street. A narrow street lay beneath Barlow Pass, 20 or 30 feet down, sealed under a roof of ice and compacted snow. It ran parallel to the road above, lined on both sides with houses pressed into the mountain as if the town had been folded under the storm and forgotten there. Porch lamps glowed. Windows burned yellow. Snow hung overhead like a ceiling. Graham's hands loosened on the wheel. "No," he said, but the word had lost all strength. The truck shifted again with a metallic groan. He had to get out, not because he wanted to go down, not because he had found courage, because County 7 was sliding, inch by inch, toward the broken shelf. And staying in the cab meant being dragged nose first into whatever waited below. Graham opened the driver's door against the tilt. Wind tore at it, but the storm above suddenly felt distant, thin, like weather happening in another world. He climbed out onto the running board, then dropped to the cracked road. His boots skidded on ice. He caught the side mirror and steadied himself. The split breathed warmth. Not much, just enough to fog the edges of the broken ice. From below came the smell of cooked onions, wood smoke, wet wool, old coffee, and something sweeter underneath, like sugar burning at the bottom of a pan. Graham looked back at the truck. The plow blade was jammed deep in the edge of the opening, holding County 7 in place like an anchor. Its orange paint looked strangely bright against the blue-white ice. The machine that had carried him through storms for half his life now seemed less like protection than a gate he had been using without knowing it. Eli stood on the far side of the split. The red cap was pulled low over his forehead. Snow crusted his shoulders. His face remained young and still. But his eyes were not fixed on Graham anymore. They looked down into the buried street. Graham forced his voice through his throat. "What is this?" Eli did not answer. He stepped backward into the falling snow and disappeared. A porch light below flickered. Then another. Then the whole buried street seemed to notice Graham at once. Curtains shifted. Faces gathered behind glass. Doors opened a few inches and stopped. The people did not step outside. They simply waited, half-lit in their houses, as if a guest had finally arrived long after the meal was ruined. Graham should have climbed back into the truck. He should have called on the handheld. He should have crawled down the road, followed the markers, walked until he found a signal, told Walt, told Jory, told anyone. Instead, he lowered himself into the crack. The ice wall was rough with trapped stones and old snow layers. He found footholds where the roadbed had fractured and descended awkwardly, one boot searching below the other. Twice he slipped. Once his shoulder struck the ice hard enough to send pain across his back. The humming grew louder as he climbed down. Not from one house, but from many. A whole town breathing the same tune through closed mouths. When his boots touched the buried street, the sound stopped. Graham stood beneath the mountain road. Above him, the crack showed a strip of storm-colored sky and the underbelly of County 7's blade jutting through ice. Snow drifted down through the opening in slow, lazy flakes. But below, the air was calm, cold. Yes, but not killing cold. The kind of cold held inside an unheated room where people had once lived and left quickly. The street was paved. That detail almost broke him. Not a mining trail, not a rough camp path. A real street, narrow but maintained, with curbs, storm drains, and a faded center line visible under a skin of frost. Houses stood close together on both sides, clapboard, stone, timber, small porches, steep roofs. Their foundations were buried, but their windows were clear. Light filled them from within. At the nearest house, a kitchen table sat visible through the front window. 4 places had been set: plates, forks, napkins, a glass pitcher of milk, a loaf of bread cut halfway through. Steam rose from a pot on the stove, curling in the yellow light as if dinner had only just been interrupted. A woman stood beside the table with her back to the window. She did not turn around. Graham walked because stopping felt worse. His boots made no sound on the frozen street. That frightened him more than the houses. He passed a green door with scratch marks around the knob. Not from claws, but from fingernails. He passed a porch where a newspaper lay folded on the mat, its headline hidden beneath frost. He passed a child's sled leaned against a railing. Red paint, bright under a transparent glaze of ice. In one yard, a snowman stood preserved beneath the buried ceiling, its coal eyes aimed toward the road above. Everywhere, rooms waited. A living room with a radio on a side table, its dial glowing. A bedroom with 2 small beds and quilts pulled back. A dining room where candles had burned down into frozen wax. A hallway filled with coats, scarves, mittens, and one empty hook. The town had not decayed. It had paused. Graham found himself whispering numbers under his breath. 1 house, 2, 3, 4. He stopped when he realized he was counting the way the old woman had counted from the window. At the next intersection, a street sign hung crooked on a pole. Mercy, Ridge Road. Below it, bolted beneath the first sign, was another, Pike Road. The letters were clean, black, official. Graham looked away, but the town gave him nowhere safe to put his eyes. At the corner stood a diner with wide front windows and a red neon sign buzzing weakly behind ice. Mercy Ridge Cafe. Inside, every stool at the counter was occupied. Men in work coats, a teenage girl in a Letterman jacket, an old man with suspenders, a waitress holding a coffee pot above a cup she had never finished filling. All of them sat motionless, facing forward, their faces turned toward the street, toward Graham. He walked past quickly. A bell rang behind him. Just once, the diner door had opened. Warm air touched the back of his neck. "Road's bad tonight," someone said. Graham did not turn. He walked faster, following the street deeper beneath the road. The houses grew more crowded. The ice ceiling lowered. In places, the buried town pressed so close to the surface that he could see the dark underside of asphalt above him, cracked and veined with trapped air bubbles. County 7's tire tracks showed faintly overhead like shadows moving across a frozen pond. Then he saw the school. It stood at the end of the block. A small brick building with white-trimmed windows and a flagpole sealed inside a column of ice. The flag still hung from it, stiff and pale. The front doors were propped open. Children's voices hummed from inside. Graham stopped in the street. His body understood before his mind allowed it. This was the place he should not enter. The place under the road. The place beneath the sentence he had repeated for 13 years. Stopping gets people killed. The school doors opened wider. A red knit cap lay on the top step. Beyond it, in the warm yellow light of the hallway, Eli stood waiting beside a row of children in winter coats, and every child was holding a small paper sign with Graham's name written on it. Every child in the school hallway held Graham's name. Not all of them had written it the same way. Some signs had been printed in careful block letters. Some were scrawled in crayon. One was written in a looping cursive too neat for the small gloved hands holding it. But the words were the same on every sheet of paper. Graham Pike. The letters faced him from the warm yellow light beyond the open school doors. Graham stood at the bottom of the steps with Eli's red cap between him and the threshold. And for one sick moment he felt 13 years collapse into a single breath. The children did not move. Their winter coats were buttoned crookedly. Snow dusted their shoulders. Though there was no snowfall inside the school, their faces were pale with the deep, bloodless color of things kept too long in cold. Eli stood behind them. He did not look angry. He never had. That was the cruelty of it. Anger Graham could have defended himself against. Accusation he could have met with explanations. But Eli only watched him with the quiet patience of someone who had waited past the point of needing an apology. Graham took one step back. The school bell rang. Once, the sound passed through the buried town like a metal pulse. Windows brightened along the street. Behind curtains, heads turned. Doors opened another inch. Somewhere in the diner, cups rattled lightly against saucers. The children lowered their signs. Not together, not dramatically, one by one, as if the message had been delivered. Then Eli lifted his hand and pointed across the street. Graham followed the gesture. Opposite the school stood a low stone building he had not noticed before. It was wedged between a narrow post office and a hardware store with shovels still displayed in the window. A wooden sign hung above its front door, letters carved deep and painted black. Mercy Ridge Town Office. The building's windows were lit. Unlike the houses, it did not feel paused. It felt occupied. Graham looked back toward the school. The hallway was empty now. The children were gone. Eli was gone. Only the red cap remained on the step, bright as a wound against the frost. He did not pick it up. The town office door was unlocked. Its hinges made no sound when he pushed it open. Warm air moved over his face, carrying the smell of paper, coal smoke, floor wax, and old damp wool. A bell above the door trembled once but did not ring. Inside, the office looked as if the staff had stepped out minutes earlier. A front counter divided the room. Behind it stood 2 desks, 3 filing cabinets, a wall calendar, a metal stove with orange light moving behind its grate, and a row of wooden mail slots labeled with family names: Keller, Armitage, Voss, Bell, Highland, Pike. Graham stared at the last one until his eyes hurt. There had never been Pikes in Mercy Ridge. There had never been Mercy Ridge. He repeated both sentences silently and felt neither one hold. On the counter sat a ledger book, open to the middle. Its pages had yellowed at the edges but were not brittle. A fountain pen rested in the gutter between them, uncapped, the nib still wet with black ink. Graham should not have touched it. He touched it anyway. The first line he saw was a date from 13 winters ago, written out in a careful municipal hand. January 23rd. Severe storm warning received. Road access uncertain. County plow service expected before nightfall. His stomach hardened. He turned the page. More entries followed, the handwriting becoming tighter as the storm worsened. School dismissed early. Children held at building until parents arrive. Power flickering along lower road. Cafe generator running. Keller boy reports seeing county plow lights on upper shelf. Sheriff frequency unreachable. Graham's lips parted, but no sound came. He turned another page. The ink changed there. The entries grew uneven. The letters pushed hard enough into the paper to leave grooves. Wind has sealed West Road. Post office window broken by drift pressure. Martha Voss says plow passed without lowering blade. Graham stepped away from the counter as if the page had given off heat. The room remained quiet. The stove clicked. A coal settled inside with a soft red sigh. He forced himself back to the ledger. There were more lines. Lights seen again, beyond school. Children calling from road. No response from county. Eli Pike arrived on foot, injured, asking if his brother had come through. The name struck him in the ribs. Eli had arrived here. Eli had not died alone on the shoulder. Not at first. He had reached the town. He had stood inside this buried place, bleeding or frozen or frightened, asking for Graham. Graham gripped the edge of the counter. Memory pressed against him, a flash of red near the road. A shape waving. Something beyond it that he had taken for blown snow or trees or headlights refracted in ice. The radio full of voices. His own hands locked on the wheel. His own voice saying there was no safe place to stop. He shut the ledger. The sound cracked through the office. A drawer behind the counter slid open by itself. Graham looked at it. Inside were manila folders, stacked neatly and tied with string. Each tab had a typed label. Missing persons, rescue calls, county correspondence, storm reports, revised. He did not move toward them. The stove popped. and all at once the room seemed colder. On the wall beside the calendar, a black rotary telephone waited on a narrow shelf. Its receiver lifted half an inch, then settled back into place. Once, twice, as if someone on the other end were deciding whether to call. Graham went behind the counter. The floorboards did not creak under his boots. That unnatural silence followed him like a hand between his shoulder blades. He opened the folder, marked rescue calls. The top sheet was a transcription log, not official county format, but careful enough to have been made by someone trying to preserve what others would deny. Columns ran across the page: caller, time, it message, response, outcome. The ink had faded but remained legible. He scanned the names: Keller, Bell, Harlan, Schoolhouse, Cafe, Voss, Residence, Town Office. The messages were short: children stranded, request plow, South Road buried, request rescue, injured male at town office, says county plow passed him. Multiple residents moving toward Upper Road with lanterns. The response column stayed blank for the first several lines. Then, near the bottom, one word appeared repeatedly in block capitals: no record. Graham turned the page. This one was county paper. He recognized the seal at once, though the formatting was older. A storm incident report, the kind submitted after a fatal weather event. Filed, stamped, and eventually forgotten unless insurance. Lawsuits, or grieving families forced it back into daylight. The heading named the pass: Barlow. The date was the same. The summary was brief. Severe weather event resulted in one confirmed fatality. Male, 23. Exposure. No additional missing persons confirmed. No inhabited structures located within affected response area. Graham read it twice, then a third time. No inhabited structures. No additional missing persons. The report had a revision stamp near the bottom. He turned to the next sheet and found another version. This one had handwritten marks in red pencil. Whole lines had been crossed out. An entire paragraph had been circled with the note: remove unverified settlement claims. Beneath that, half blotted by age and moisture, was a paragraph that had not made it into the official version. Multiple calls received from community identifying itself as Mercy Ridge. Location uncertain due to outdated road maps. Reports indicate approximately 60 residents sheltering in homes. School, cafe, and town office. County plow unit observed passing access road shortly before major slide. Graham's knees weakened. 60. The word opened inside him like a hole. He had not driven past one man. He had not driven past only Eli. He had driven past a road, a town, lights, children, voices. No, he whispered. The filing cabinet at the back of the room opened. One drawer rolled out slowly. Metal sliding on metal. Inside were maps. Not modern county maps with clean lines and false emptiness, but older survey sheets, hand-copied road plans, emergency access drawings, tax parcels, snow route overlays. Graham pulled them free one by one and spread them across the desk. Mercy Ridge existed on all of them. A narrow valley tucked below the shelf. A feeder road branching from Barlow near marker 42. A school, a cafe, a post office, 43 residential structures, 1 town office, 1 church, 1 old mine road marked as secondary evacuation. On newer maps, the valley became blank. On later maps, the feeder road vanished. On county copies after the storm, the entire place had been replaced by contour lines and the word undeveloped. Graham found the final folder without meaning to. It sat alone beneath the maps, tied with black string. The label read, Route Unit Records. His hands were numb by then, but he untied it. Inside were dispatch sheets for every plow active that night. Unit numbers, driver names, fuel readings, radio check-ins, road positions, notes added later by supervisors. Graham saw his own name, Pike, Graham County 7. His vision narrowed. Beside the entry was a handwritten note, not typed, not stamped, written in red pencil. The same pencil used to erase Mercy Ridge from the storm report. Past access. Did not stop. Graham stared until the letters blurred. Below the note was another line, written in a different hand. Driver statement amended. Claims no lights visible. New road present. A sound came from the front of the office. The bell above the door trembled. Graham turned. The door had opened behind him. Snow drifted across the threshold, though the street outside remained still. On the counter, the black telephone began to ring. 1 sharp ring, then another, then another. Graham did not answer it. The answering machine beside the phone clicked on by itself, though he had not seen it there before. A strip of magnetic tape began to turn behind a cloudy plastic window. A younger version of Graham's voice filled the town office. Flat, controlled, breathless. This is County 7. I passed marker 42. No structures visible. No persons observed. Road unsafe to stop. Continuing south, the tape hissed. Then came Eli's voice in the background, distant but unmistakable, screaming Graham's name. Eli's scream came through the tape like it had been waiting inside the machine for 13 years. Not faded, not distant in the way old recordings usually were. It arrived raw and close, tearing through the town office with the full force of a living throat. Graham. The name broke against the walls. Graham staggered back from the counter. His hip struck the filing cabinet, and the open drawer rattled behind him. The tape kept turning. On the recording, the younger Graham breathed hard into the mic. This is County 7. His voice said again, flatter now. Too flat. No structures visible. No persons observed. Road unsafe to stop. Continuing south. Then the voice beneath it, Eli's voice, screamed again. Not from the radio. Not exactly. From somewhere outside the truck cab in the recording. Muffled by storm, but unmistakable. Graham. Wait. The tape clicked. Silence filled the room. Graham stood with both hands braced on the counter. Head bowed. Eyes fixed on the black telephone. The town office seemed to lean toward him. The walls, the files, the maps, the stove, the old calendar. All of it waited with the patience of buried things. He shook his head once. No. The word came out small. The answering machine rewound by itself. The tape clicked again. His younger voice returned. This is County 7. I passed marker 42. No structures visible. No persons observed. Road unsafe to stop. Continuing south. In the background, Eli screamed his name. Graham lunged and tore the machine from the shelf. Its cord snapped. Plastic cracked against the floor. The tape spilled out in black loops across the boards like exposed intestine. The voice stopped. For half a second, he heard only his own breathing. Then every telephone in Mercy Ridge began to ring. The black phone on the office wall. A phone somewhere in the post office. Another in the hardware store. One in the diner. One in every house along the street. The sound rose in layers. Sharp and old-fashioned. Hundreds of bells hammering through the buried town. Windows brightened. Curtains drew back. Faces appeared behind glass. Not accusing. Not shouting. Watching. Graham backed away from the broken machine. The office door stood open. Beyond it, the frozen street glowed with kitchen light and porch lamps. The people of Mercy Ridge stood inside their homes. In cafes. In classrooms. Behind counters and stair rails. All listening to phones that had not been answered. His memory opened. Not slowly. Not gently. It broke. 13 years ago. The night had not been empty. The night had been full of lights. Graham saw it now with a clarity so vicious it felt like punishment. County 7 climbing through whiteout. Younger hands steady on the wheel. Fuel low. Nerves frayed. The radio full of broken county chatter. He had been angry before he ever reached the shelf. Angry at the storm. Angry at the dispatcher. Angry at Eli for taking the old pickup up the mountain after Graham had told him not to. Angry at every helpless voice that made a man responsible for more than one road could carry. The first light had appeared near marker 42. He had seen it. Not a reflection. Not lightning behind snow. A lantern swinging in the dark. Then another. Then porch lights. A whole string of them low beneath the road. Where he had not known a road existed. He remembered leaning forward, squinting into the storm. He remembered the blade catching the edge of the feeder road where snow had buried its entrance. He remembered seeing a sign whipped sideways by wind. Mercy Ridge. He remembered saying aloud, "What the hell is that?" Then the radio had cracked open. Voices poured through. Not one voice. Many. A woman saying children were trapped at the school. A man saying the West Road was gone. Someone from the cafe begging for a plow to clear the access. Someone else shouting that a slide had already covered 2 houses. Then Eli. Breathless. Panicked. Trying not to cry. "Graham. I'm here. I'm at the town office. They're real people. Graham, you have to stop." Graham gripped the counter until his nails hurt through the gloves. He had not forgotten because grief had been too heavy. He had forgotten because remembering would have made him a murderer. That was the word the town finally gave him. Murderer was too simple. Maybe too clean. He had not taken a weapon to anyone. He had not pushed snow over their roofs with his hands. He had not ordered the mountain to slide. But he had seen the lights. He had heard the calls. He had known. In the deepest and most practical part of himself, that stopping would mean backing down the road, lowering the blade, clearing the buried access, calling it in. Waiting in the storm while the fuel gauge dropped and the wind shoved at the truck and the slope above them groaned. He had known stopping might trap him too, so he had kept moving. The old sentence returned, stripped of all its usefulness. Stopping gets people killed. That was not why he had driven on to He had driven on because stopping might have killed him. The phones kept ringing. Graham turned toward the wall maps. Mercy Ridge existed there in lines and names and lots and school zones. Not a myth, not a ghost town, not a hallucination born from ice. A community old enough to have tax parcels, school attendance, delivery routes, winter preparedness plans. A place that had depended on the same county that later erased it. The second half of the memory came after he descended. He had reached the yard before dawn with the plow blade bent. Half the fuel gone, and his face numb. Walt had met him in the bay. Jory had not worked there then. Another dispatcher, Len, sharp, had stood behind the glass with a cigarette shaking between his fingers. They had already heard rumors. Broken calls from unknown locations. A boy named Eli trying to transmit through county emergency frequency. Reports of lights above the shelf. Graham had lied before anyone told him to. No road up there, he had said. Len had stared at him. Walt had asked again. Nothing at 42? Nothing. Graham had answered. Snow glare. Maybe hunters lower down. I didn't see structures. I didn't see people. And because men in county jackets preferred an answer that did not require 60 bodies beneath a mountain, they had accepted it. At first, then, later, they had improved it. The reports changed. The maps changed. The old feeder road became unstable terrain. Then an error. Then nothing. Mercy Ridge became an unverified settlement claim. The missing became travelers elsewhere. Runaways. Bookkeeping ghosts. Names without confirmed location. Eli became the only official death because Eli had been Graham's brother. And even paperwork had limits on how much blood it could hide. Graham remembered signing the amended statement with hands that would not stop shaking. He remembered Walt saying, "You sure?" Pike? He remembered saying yes. He remembered his mother crying into the phone. He remembered thinking, even then, that if Eli had only stayed out of the storm, none of this would have happened. That had been the first lie. The rest of his life had grown around it like ice. Across the office, the drawer marked storm, reports, revised, slammed shut by itself. The phone stopped ringing. The sudden silence was worse. Graham lifted his head. The people of Mercy Ridge stood outside now. They filled the street in front of the town office, men, women, children, elderly couples, teenagers in winter coats, a waitress still holding a coffee pot, a school teacher with chalk dust on her skirt, the old woman in the blue housecoat, the Keller boy, the children with paper signs lowered at their sides. Behind them stood Eli. The red cap was in his hands now. No one spoke. Graham stepped into the doorway. "I didn't know how many," he said. The words sounded cheap before they finished leaving his mouth. The old woman looked at him. Her face was lined, calm, and cold at the edges. "But you knew there was one," she said. Graham closed his eyes. Eli's voice came next, quiet as snow settling on glass. "You heard me." Graham opened his eyes again. The buried town waited, warm behind windows and frozen in the street. Not because it needed him to discover what happened. Mercy Ridge had always known the dead did not need evidence. The evidence was for Graham. Above them, something groaned. The ceiling of ice shifted. Snow sifted down from cracks. Far overhead, County 7's engine turned over by itself, coughing once, then roaring to life. Its amber lights flashed through the split in the road like a warning beacon seen through lake ice. The plow blade began to move, slowly at first. Then, with purpose, it scraped forward over the roof of the buried town. Every face in Mercy Ridge turned upward. Graham understood then that the town was not only showing him the past, it was rising. And the machine he had used to bury the truth had started clearing the way. County 7's engine roared above the buried town. The sound came down through the ice like thunder trapped under glass. Graham looked up from the town office doorway and saw the plow's amber lights sweeping across the frozen ceiling, cutting slow orange arcs through the snow-packed roof of Mercy Ridge. The blade scraped forward again. A long crack opened overhead. The people in the street did not scream. That was what made Graham's stomach turn. They simply tilted their faces upward, watching the road above them split. Snow sifted down into their hair, onto their shoulders, across the waitress's coffee pot, the teacher's chalk-dusted skirt, the children's paper signs. They had already lived through panic. What remained in them now was worse than fear. Recognition. The town was rising. He could see it in the way the ice ceiling bowed. Roof peaks pressed upward. Chimneys pushed through compacted snow. The street beneath Graham's boots trembled as if the mountain were exhaling after holding its breath for 13 years. Houses groaned against their frozen burial. Porch lamps brightened. Window panes flexed. Somewhere. A church bell rang once, though he had not yet seen the church. County 7 moved again. Its blade dragged over a roof with a splintering shriek. The old woman in the blue housecoat turned to Graham. "You know what happens if we come up." He did. He did not know how, but he did. Barlow Pass would crack open from shoulder to shoulder. The road would collapse into Mercy Ridge. Spring surveyors would find roofs where pavement had been, kitchens under guardrails, school desks in the slide path. 60 names that had been removed from every official report. The county would not be able to call it debris. Walt would not be able to call it mining timber. Graham would not be able to call it snow glare. The dead would become geography. The lie would lose its road. Above them, the plow reversed. Its backup alarm echoed faintly through the ice. Then it moved forward again. The blade struck another house. A little boy near the front of the crowd flinched, his paper sign bent in his hands. Graham recognized him from the window. The child who had asked why he did not stop. The boy looked no older than 8. His cheeks were still round. His eyes were still dark and still. Graham stepped backward into the town office. "No," he said. No one followed him. The black telephone on the wall rang once. "This time," he answered. The receiver was cold enough to burn. At first, there was only static. Then Jory's voice came through. Thin, frightened, and very far away. "Graham? Graham. Are you there?" He closed his eyes. "I'm here. Where are you? Your GPS is everywhere. It keeps jumping from marker 38 to 42 to..." Her voice broke under a burst of interference. "Walt says your truck is moving, but no one's responding." Graham looked through the open doorway at the frozen street, at the people waiting under the road. "I'm under Barlow." Silence. Then Jory said carefully, "What does that mean?" His mouth opened. The old sentence tried to rise first. Storm glare. No structures visible. No persons observed. Road unsafe to stop. He had said those words once and built 13 years from them. They knew the shape of his mouth. They knew how to protect him. They stood ready, familiar and obedient. Instead, Graham said, "There was a town." Static hissed. Jory did not answer. He held the receiver harder. At marker 42, old access road below the shelf, Mercy Ridge. It was on the maps. It was there the night Eli died. Another crack opened overhead. Snow dropped in a pale sheet outside the office. Someone in the street brushed it from a child's shoulders. Graham swallowed. "I saw the lights," he said. "I heard the calls. I heard my brother. I passed the access road and kept moving." The receiver clicked. For one terrible second, he thought the line had gone dead. Then Walt Kinney's voice came on. "Pike." Graham's knees weakened at the sound of him. Older now. Rougher. But carrying the same weight it had carried 13 years ago in the county bay before dawn. When men had stood around a lie and decided it was easier to warm their hands over it than put it out. "Walt," Graham said, "listen to me. Where exactly are you?" "I'm in the town office." A long silence followed. Not confusion, not disbelief. A silence with memory inside it. Walt said, "You need to get back in that truck." Graham looked at the phone. "What?" "Get back in the truck. The town is coming up." "I know." The words emptied the room. Graham could hear Walt breathing through the line. Behind him. At the yard or dispatch office or wherever he stood. Men were talking over each other. Someone said Graham's GPS had gone dark. Someone else said the upper shelf was cracking. Jory's voice asked Walt what he meant, but Walt did not answer her. Graham spoke slowly. "You knew. Not all of it. You knew enough. We knew there were old claims, bad maps, unconfirmed calls. We knew that slope had gone. We knew your brother was dead. That was what could be proven. You changed the reports." Walt's voice hardened. But beneath it was something frightened and old. The state would have buried the department. Families would have sued the county into dust. Men would have gone to prison for not knowing about a settlement that shouldn't have still been there. It was there. I know that now. You knew then. Walt did not answer. Outside, the people of Mercy Ridge watched Graham through the office windows, their faces reflected in the glass over his own, layering him among them until he looked like another resident waiting for rescue. Walt said, "If that road opens, it won't stop at the shelf." Graham gripped the receiver. "What are you talking about?" "The slide path runs down into the lower valley. If the whole cap breaks, we could lose the grade. Maybe the bridge. Maybe Dale if he's still below you. You understand? Whatever's happening up there, you need to stabilize it." "Stabilize it. Use the plow." Graham stared at the maps spread across the desk. Mercy Ridge Road. Pike Road. School. Cafe. Town office. 43 houses. One church. One old mine road. He understood then what Walt was asking. Not rescue. Not confession. Maintenance. Keep the road intact. Keep the pass sealed. Keep the dead under snow. Keep the living safe from what the dead might prove. Graham began to laugh. It came out quietly at first, then cracked into something ugly. The receiver shook against his ear. In the street, Eli watched him without expression. Walt said, "Pike, you want me to bury them again?" I want you to keep the mountain from taking more people. There are people here. They're gone. They're standing outside. They are gone, Walt said. And now his voice was shaking. Your brother is gone. That town is gone. Whatever you're seeing, whatever is happening, the only thing you can do now is keep the road from breaking open. Graham looked at Eli. Eli's red cap hung from one hand. Jory came back on the line. Her voice, smaller. Graham, is this true? He could not answer her directly. I gave a false statement, he said. Record this if you can. I saw Mercy Ridge. I heard rescue calls. I heard Eli alive. I drove past the access road and reported nothing visible. Graham, Walt warned. He kept going. The county amended maps and storm reports afterward. The settlement was removed from records. Missing residents were not listed as confirmed casualties. Eli Pike was not the only person lost that night. The telephone line filled with a high whine. The lights in the town office flickered. Outside, the buried street rose another foot. Graham felt it lift under him. The ice ceiling buckled. County 7's blade scraped uselessly above, then caught, then screamed as metal twisted against something stronger than road. Through the phone, Jory was crying. Walt said, very softly, "You damn fool." The line died. The receiver went silent in Graham's hand. For a moment, nothing moved. Then the people outside began to step backward from the town office. Parting down the middle of the street, Eli remained. Above, County 7's engine revved. The truck was still trying to plow. The dead town was still rising. Confession had not saved anyone. Not yet. Maybe confession never saved the dead. Maybe it only removed the last shelter from the living. Eli walked to the doorway. You told them, he said. Graham nodded. His throat hurt too much to speak. Eli looked upward, toward the blade grinding through ice. Now choose what kind of man you are when someone can still be reached. Graham understood. The emergency call had gone out. The lie had been spoken aloud. Somewhere below, Jory had heard enough to begin undoing what paper had done. But the mountain was opening too fast. If Mercy Ridge rose all at once, the road would collapse. The lower pass would slide. And living drivers below might die beneath the same snow. If he climbed back into County 7, he could angle the blade. He could push the rising snowpack back over the cracks. He could hold the town down a little longer. Not forever. Maybe only until others escaped below. Maybe only until the confession reached someone who would not erase it. Graham stepped past Eli into the street. The people of Mercy Ridge watched him go. No forgiveness came from them. No curse either. Only room. He climbed the fractured ice wall toward the strip of storm above. His hands bled through his gloves. Twice he slipped and struck his knees hard enough to make white light burst behind his eyes. The plow roared overhead. Unmanned. Furious. Waiting. When he pulled himself onto the road, County 7 stood crooked over the crack. Amber lights spinning. Blade twisted but still lowered. The driver's door hung open. Beyond the windshield, in the passenger seat, lay the Mercy Ridge newspaper. The headline had changed. Confession received as road fails. Graham climbed into the cab. The radio lit up. Not with Jory's voice. Not Walt's. Every channel opened at once, full of children humming the four-note tune. Graham put both hands on the wheel. Ahead of him, the road was no longer road. It was roofs, chimneys, porch lights, and faces rising through ice. He lowered the blade, and from beneath it, Eli whispered, "This time, don't drive past us." Graham lowered the blade. County 7 answered with a sound like an animal forced back onto broken legs. The hydraulics screamed. The frame shuddered. The plow's steel edge dropped against the rising roofs of Mercy Ridge and caught on the first chimney hard enough to throw Graham forward against the wheel. Pain burst across his chest. He stayed on the throttle. The truck lurched ahead. Beneath the blade, wood split, ice shattered, and snow rolled forward in a heavy white wall. It was not like clearing road. Road gave way in layers: powder, crust, packed drift, then asphalt. This was different. The plow pushed against houses, porches, roof beams, street signs. The frozen pressure of an entire town trying to become visible. The wheel bucked in Graham's hands. The radio filled with voices. Not screams, not curses. Names: Keller, Voss, Harlan, Bell, Armitage. Names he had never learned because learning them would have made them impossible to erase. Children's voices mixed with old men's, women's, teenagers, all of them speaking at once beneath the four-note hum. Graham drove into them. He did not look right or left. If he looked, he would see the faces at the windows again. He would see the old woman in the blue housecoat. He would see the school children holding signs. He would see Eli standing somewhere beneath the blade, no longer asking why he had not stopped, but watching what Graham did now that the question had been answered. The truck climbed. That was the impossible part. County 7 was no longer driving along the shelf. It was driving over the upward curve of Mercy Ridge as the town rose through the ice. The road he knew had broken into slabs around him. Guardrail posts stuck out at wrong angles. Mile markers leaned like grave crosses. Beneath the headlights, rooftops surfaced and vanished under the rolling snow. He pushed back over them. The fuel gauge lay below empty. The engine kept running. Graham understood that it would run as long as the town required it. He angled the blade left, forcing snow over the widening crack. The first pass buried the church steeple to its bell. The second covered the school doors. The third drove a wave of snow across the diner windows, smothering the red neon sign until only the final letter glowed under ice, then went out. With each pass, the road tried to remember itself. The crack narrowed. The ice ceiling below groaned. County 7 reversed without Graham touching the gear shift. He gripped the wheel and let the truck drag him back. In the mirror, Mercy Ridge appeared behind him fully for one moment. A street lined with warm kitchens, tables set, porch lights burning, people standing in the snow, quiet and patient, as if watching a funeral from inside their own graves. At the center of the street stood Eli. He wore the red cap again. His face was turned upward toward Graham, and this time there was something like sorrow in it. The truck shifted forward. The blade covered him. Graham made a sound then. A small, broken thing that would have embarrassed him if anyone living had heard it. He drove until the windshield turned white, until the town became shapes beneath snow, until the shapes became bumps, until the bumps became only the uneven surface of a winter road. The radio snapped. Jory's voice came through in fragments. Graham, if you can hear me, units are backing down from Lower Barlow. Walt ordered full closure. I recorded what you said. Graham, please answer. His hand moved toward the mic. For a moment, he imagined answering. He imagined saying he was alive. He imagined Jory telling him to come down, telling him that confession was enough, that men could crawl out from under what they had done if they finally named it. Then the road ahead split again. A porch light glowed beneath the ice. Graham put his hand back on the wheel. No, he whispered. Not yet. He pushed forward. County 7 plowed through the night. Below the mountain, they heard him for hours. Dale Rusk stopped near the lower bridge with his hazard lights blinking against the storm. Reported the sound first. He said an engine was working above the closure gate, though no taillight showed on the pass. Jory tried Graham's frequency until her voice gave out. Walt stood in the dispatch office with one hand on the back of her chair, staring at the old wall map as if the blank space near marker 42 had begun to accuse him. At some point before dawn, the GPS signal for County 7 vanished completely. The engine sound did not. It continued above the storm, rising and falling. Metal scraping through snow, backing, turning, pushing forward again. Men gathered outside the county yard and listened without speaking. No one suggested going up, not while the pass was breaking, not while the storm still held the mountain in both hands. By morning, Barlow Pass was sealed under the largest slide anyone in the county had seen in decades. The upper road disappeared from marker 38 to marker 44. Guardrails, signs, pavement, drainage cuts, all gone, beneath a packed white mass that survey crews later described as unstable beyond safe excavation. State geologists came. Reporters came. Families came after Jory released the recording. The recording did not stay buried. Graham's confession moved through county offices, then state archives, then old newspaper rooms and family kitchens. Mercy Ridge returned first as a rumor, then as a lawsuit, then as a list of names recovered from tax files no one had fully destroyed. Maps surfaced. Letters surfaced. A school attendance book appeared in a storage basement beneath the old courthouse. Every page damp but readable. Walt Kinney retired before the inquiry ended. Some said he resigned. Some said he simply stopped coming to work after reporters found the red pencil revisions in his garage. Jory Haskell stayed long enough to make sure every recovered name was read aloud at the memorial service held below the closed pass in spring. 62 names were spoken into the wind, not counting Eli Pike, whose mother listened from Arizona over a phone held up by a deputy. No bodies were recovered. No houses were found. The state declared the upper shelf too dangerous for full excavation. The official language changed again, though more carefully this time. Mercy Ridge was no longer denied. It was presumed destroyed beneath severe avalanche compression. Graham Pike was listed as missing, presumed dead. After heroic efforts to stabilize the failing road during an extreme weather event, Jory objected to the word heroic. No one removed it. Summer came late that year. Snow melted from the lower grades, but not from the shelf. Even in July, a white scar remained across the mountain where Barlow Pass had once cut through. The closure gate was moved farther down. New signs were installed. Concrete barriers blocked the old road. Drivers were told to use the long route around. Most did. Some still stopped at the barrier during winter, especially locals who remembered when the pass saved 40 minutes and cost whatever it cost. They would sit with engines idling, staring up through falling snow at the darkness where the road used to climb. That was when they heard it. Far beyond the closure gate, above the buried switchbacks, an old diesel engine would turn over. First a cough, then a steady growl, then the scrape of a plow blade lowering against snow. No lights showed at first, only sound, metal against ice, chains over pavement that was no longer supposed to exist. The heavy push and reverse of a driver working the same stretch again and again. On certain nights, when the storm was deep enough and the mountain wanted memory, amber lights appeared high on the shelf. They moved slowly behind the snowfall. Forward, back, forward again, keeping something down. New drivers laughed when the older ones told them not to answer the radio above Barlow. They laughed until their first winter storm, when static filled the cab and a child's voice asked from some impossible channel whether the road was clear yet. Those who knew better switched the radio off. But sometimes, under the static, another voice could be heard. A man's voice, rough and tired, speaking as if through a throat full of snow. "Not yet," he would say. Then the blade would scrape again. Years later, after most of the inquiry files had been boxed and the memorial wreaths had rotted away, Jory drove to the lower closure gate on the anniversary of the storm. She had left the road department by then. Her hair had started to gray at the temples. In the passenger seat sat a folder containing copies of every Mercy Ridge name she had been able to confirm. She did not open it. Snow fell softly through the headlights. Above the gate, the mountain was dark. Jory stepped out of her car and stood listening. For a long time, there was only wind. Then, far up the closed pass, an engine started. Jory closed her eyes. The sound moved across the mountain, patient and mechanical. A blade dropped. Snow pushed. Chains bit. Somewhere above the buried town, Graham Pike continued his route. Not to open the road. Not to save himself. Not even, perhaps, to earn forgiveness. He plowed because Mercy Ridge still rose whenever the world forgot it. He plowed because some lies did not stay buried unless someone kept working. He plowed because once, long ago, he had believed moving on was the same thing as surviving. Now he knew better. Moving on was only another kind of burial. Jory stood at the gate until the cold reached her bones. Before she left, she thought she saw a faint yellow light bloom beneath the snow high on the shelf. A porch light, maybe, or a window, or only the old amber flash of County 7 turning in the storm. Then the radio inside her car crackled to life. She had not turned it on. Through the static came Graham's voice, worn thin by distance. "Road's not clear." A pause followed. Then, very softly, a child answered him. "We know. Some hauntings are not about the dead asking to be saved. Sometimes the dead already know they cannot be saved. What they want is for the living to stop pretending the road was always empty. Graham Pike's punishment is not simply that he must plow forever. It is that he finally understands the difference between surviving a storm and abandoning people inside it. Maybe the most frightening thing about Mercy Ridge is not that a town was buried under the ice, but that so many people found it easier to erase the map than answer the calls. If you had been driving through that storm, would you have stopped? And now, the night has reached its gentle ending. Thank you for spending this quiet time with me here at Chilly Midnight. I hope tonight's story gave you a place to rest your thoughts, a little shadow to wander through, and a calm feeling to carry with you into sleep. Before you leave, let me know in the comments how the story felt tonight. Did it suit your mood? Or would you like the next one to be more chilling, more emotional, or a little softer? For now, take one slow breath. Let the day fade away. Let your room become still, your heart become quiet, and your body sink deeper into rest. Sleep well. My dear friend, may your dreams be peaceful. May your mind feel light, and may tomorrow bring you a softer morning. Until the next midnight brings us together again. Good night.